And wait, lad, did you see this? Is your screen blank?
No, I'm
Your
good.
screen blank, brother?
No, I think we're
Huh?
live. We're live.
So I got an error that LinkedIn it can't do LinkedIn, but it's still recording. Like we're still live. So welcome to the Mikey G and Adam podcast for the week. I don't know. I'm having problems with LinkedIn. I really want to get this on LinkedIn. But yeah, we're live. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. I'm good. And yourself?
I am freaking excited. So today we're gonna talk about. Well, we have our first guest. This is honestly what's cool. This is the first time I have, through all of the years, two previous podcast guests back on the same show. So Johnny from Augmented Labs, which is we'll have a discussion about that in Aeon and Creative. He's gonna come on. He's a flow state master, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about why flow state and AI makes sense, or how would you even go about that? And then two, we're gonna always start off with a little bit of an update about what Adam's cooking up with his company. I am helping him out spread the word. We're going to be making content. We're going to be doing some BD together. I couldn't be more excited that you called me up, man. I still think about that to this day. Like, what has it been, a month and a half or so? You called me up and you're like, Mikey, we need to figure out how to work together. I remember when we first met after the podcast, you're like, we got to figure out how to work together. And we're figuring it out. We're going to do it. And I'm super excited about that. And then three, I love this guy, Alex from the Moonshots podcast. He does a banger job of doing a news update and like what the singularity looks like to on this day. And then he just lists all the crazy things that are happening in the world of AI. So if we have time, we'll touch on that too. But with all that being said, start us off with how did the week go, brother? Happy birthday, by the way. Big old birthday day. Tell me how the week went, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you cooked up and as much as you want to share about a massive aha moment this week.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, and it's been a great week. It's been really awesome. Had a nice, relaxing birthday. But more importantly than that, had a really cool sort of breakthrough moment. Stuff that I've been architecting for a long time with the system, with Civitas, with the AI agent building. And more than that, just the guardrails around that and the autonomy of that. And so it was a really cool experience. Like, I mean, I'd architected it and I've been sort of manually putting it through. And one of the processes was inferring, it came up and it sort of rejected its positioning. And I was like, nah, this is an error. I thought it was an actual problem. I was an error. I was about to lose my mind, right? And I started looking at the logs and I'm like, oh my goodness, it actually did what I built it to do, but fully autonomously. And so that was just one of those, wow, proud parent moments, as you could sort of say. you know?
Proud parent. And kind of, you know what I'd be interested on is like stepping me through a little bit more of the details of how that worked. Like what was it doing at that current moment in time? How did you come about this aha moment of like, oh wait, it's not doing what I want it to do, but it autonomously thought about something new to do. Like take me through kind of the process there because I think still at that time it's overarching and vague. Not everybody's exactly familiar with the platform. So give us a little bit more context.
Yeah. So obviously we've got Civitas, but a part of Civitas has its own optimizer inside there. So it looks at its episodic memories, it looks at how it learned, its priors, and it helps self-improving itself. So every iteration, right, depending on the set, it grows between 10 generations. So every three sort of inference, it runs an optimization and that grows 10 generations. And then what it does is it's basically exercising itself. It says, okay, based on my priors, my replay, my sleeping at night, this is what I think is better, right? Like I'm going to get better results if I do this, right? So I'm self-optimizing myself. But before it allows itself, we allow it to actually, expand its brain tissue. How I'm thinking, it's got to put it through a quorum, right? A vote, a census, a consensus, and there's 5
And,
judges,
and these
right?
judges are agents, right?
Correct. They're also Civitas agents, so they're also going through the same process, but
Do
they're
they have
specific.
distinct personalities and kind of like tasks or specialties, or are they just kind of like duplicates of the overall Civitas agent?
At the moment, they're the overall, but you'll see their weight and pressures and stuff change, right? Like
Mm.
you can see it. It's really cool to watch, right?
Explain that to everybody too, because they don't understand weights and pressures as well. Because this is a fascinating concept, and I don't think a lot of people that use AI understand that stuff is going on in the background. So describe that to us a little bit too.
Yeah, okay. So I'll use that in the context of a human behavioral pattern, right? So it's like somebody asks you a question, right, that you're comfortable with, you answer it with ease because you know what you're talking about. It's like, yeah, no problem. But all of a sudden, if you're faced with a question that you're not sure about, right, you really have to think about it. So all of a sudden, you start to really process. Your brain starts to increase, like almost say like your blood pressure's going up because you're feeling a little nervous and a little uneasy and a little destabilized, right? Because you're trying to sort of pull through your memory, your learned memory of life, and say, hey, how do I answer this? Do I actually do I know how to answer this, right? B, am I comfortable answering this the way I want to answer it? And so the same thing is happening inside the brain tissue of the agent, right? So Civitas sitting there and it's looking, going, wait a minute, oh, am I comfortable about this? And you'll see it's sort of like going, I'm comfortable and it's cool, right? And then the pressure, it's like, I'm unsure, high pressure, right? It's really going high. And then entropy is starting to look at the stuff. Now, the difference with Civitas is it uses causal inference. Now, what's a causal inference? Well, it's basically saying, as we look in our brain, so I say, hey, Mikey, tell me about, how to build a brand, right? And you're going to be like, dude, this is how you do it because you know what you're talking about.
Right.
Okay, Mikey, tell me how, if I took this AI, right, and you wanted to develop it into a brand and stuff like that, but actually take it but from the AI's perspective, right? You're going to have the knowledge because you sort of study around, but you're kind of like you're stalling a bit. So you go, well,
Right.
wait a minute. And so all of a sudden you just have that little bump. And it's not saying we, stop. So hence that's what happens with the Civitas, with the AI, with the systems. They stop, they pause, they go, wait a minute, I've got to have high pressure. I have to really think about this. I'm really using a lot of brain. And the objective is to make that more efficient, right? So that's why you get delayed responses. So it takes a little longer for it to come back with an answer. Where we want it snappy, but we want it accurate, right? We don't want just an answer for the sake of an answer. We want something that's quite strong.
Right.
So what the objective is to find that answer, right, or that result fast but efficient, but also learning from its prior mistakes, right? As we learn as humans. So we're kind of like, okay, I've learned from my prior mistakes, right? I know what works and what doesn't work. And so that's what Civitas does. It's creating its own, optimizing its better efficiency. And an objective is to, what you want to reduce your pressure, reduce your entropy, and want to be smooth like butter. You want to be flowing through. And so that's pretty much the whole process. And a part of that is, okay, so it's running through its decision. Cool. Now it's sitting on the side at the back offline and going, let me reflect on that decision to see how I actually answered that and see if I can improve my positioning, but within the confined space. So it actually has guardrails already preset. So it's like, okay, I'm allowed to explore in this box. This is cool. And it comes back and says, hey, I found a new sort of baseline. This is my previous baseline. We'll call it's theta, right? Basically, this is my theta point. And all of a sudden, I found a new best theta, right? So I'm going to be, I think this is much more efficient based on all my experience. But before it can action and take that on, which is super cool, but also dangerous, right? It needs to put that through to a Senate, right? And that Senate, and it says to the Senate, hey, I've done my homework. Here's my research. Here's my checks. Here's my assessment, how I came up with this result. I want to use this now as my new baseline, my weight baseline.
Yeah.
And the Senate says, okay, cool, no worries. Let's have a look at that. Let's have a review of that individually and see how that aligns with the rules, the regulations. Is it pushing the boundaries? Is it going over, in or out? Is it drifting out? And so three of five need to agree to that, right? So you're creating this consensus quorum. This is all happening autonomously, okay? And so it goes through and it votes on that decision. And if it's agreed, green ticks, no problem. Then it gets promoted and it gets cryptographically signed, and that now Civitas can use its new improved weight adjustment to saying, okay, cool, I'm just that little bit smarter without any human in the loop. So what happened was, and the way I built the system was that it can't evolve itself without the quorum, the Senate promoting it. But more importantly, its proposals need to align to the trust region, the confine, the regulatory rules. Well, it put a proposal through, and this is what I was like, I built it like this, but actually watching it happening autonomously, like without me, sort of forcing the hand, so to speak. It put a proposal through because it was doing really well, right? And advances quite fast. And all of a sudden it put a proposal through and it got rejected. And I was like, oh man, there's a bug in the code. There's something wrong, because I was trying to fix something else. And I had a look at it and it's like, no, the actual Senate rejected it. And the reason why it rejected it was because it violated some of the rules, some of the boundaries. And that was it. So what it meant was that its previous weights approval, so the business doesn't stop. So the system doesn't stop. It's like, okay, that's my previously approved. I can use that, right? But the new one, I can't use that because that was rejected. So I have to reprocess that through. So it was a cool experience because it's basically AI approving, governing AI fully autonomously, no human in the loop.
And but what fundamentally changed, though? Because that's the system that you were trying to build. Was it before you would have to manually push through a new upgrade, and this time it just did it itself? Like, what was that aha moment?
No, so I built it from the start from that, because as I sort of said, I don't want to be the guy that builds Skynet, right? So Civitas is a self-evolving organism, where it's able to think and evolve and learn and not also lose its track. Sort of it's keeping flowing through, but also looking at everything rather than going, oh, I'm looking at narrow and then funneling out and losing my path. It like looks at the whole world, a multifaceted, and brings it into this, sort of cortex and go, okay, I've come through and I'm distilling this. And so, but doing that, you got to get smarter. You got to, you can't just keep doing the same thing. It's cool. Okay, we've created this recursive funnel, but it's not learning. It's not evolving. And so I built it in that substrate, putting that in place, but it was still very manual, where I would intentionally put in misinformation or whatever it was, or adjust it, or forcing it to change its thing, to basically to have it to reject and approve, to just test the Senate out, right?
Well, and in essence, training data, right? Like you're kind of training it, right?
Yeah. But this way I moved it now to going, okay, I didn't put any false information in, it's like that. I just let it run its thing, right? Because I was testing something else. Because the advancement to it was not only that does it produce its results to say, hey, this is my results, as an extra sort of security gate, it's reproducible. So it could replay the whole event, right, in full time. So you could basically take that whole transcript, right, and how it did it, and reproduce it in another lab, and you should get the same result that matches cryptographically what was done, right? So that's just an extra sort of validation point. So that's where I was testing on that. And rather than me sort of manipulating to, having it approve or not in the training, it trained itself, it proposed, it submitted its proposal got rejected, and then shortly after I put another one through and its proposal was approved. Right. And I looked further down and it actually pushed the bounds. It was basically what would happen was, even though it had its boundaries, it still drifted a little, right, and put its proposal over the over the guardrails, and that was rejected. So it became an extra firewall.
So it's so insane and so exciting. So when you then do think about these kind of frontier models and the bigger players, I think one of the surprising things, you'll hear the top people say this over and over again, is what's surprising to them is how stupid, dumb, simple this is, which is just put a massive amount of data through this stuff and it just gets smarter, right? So it's like squeezing all of this crap through and the output just gets better and better, hence why we're scaling all these data centers. How do you, because then you're saying this thing is getting smarter. So what does the training look like for someone that does not have access to the hundreds of billions of dollars to make a frontier model? Are the fundamentals still the same and just the scale smaller? Like, what does that look like and how can you explain that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And this is something that I've been mindful of, and I think a lot are moving to this sort of space as well, is efficiency, right? So it needs to be energy efficient, but also efficiency. So when you're limiting your resources, you become a lot more creative in what you can and can't do. So part of that is also chunking stuff down. And sort of, they're publishing our papers and talking about, these different sort of solutions. And like, we solved that 10 months ago. And the way of doing that is basically taking it. If I opened a fire hose of information at you right now, right? You would be like, "Whoa, I can only process so much," right? And then you just tune out. It's almost like your brain just triggers off. It's like, oh, I need to get some fresh air. I need to just take a walk. Well, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. We just miscalculate to think that because it's an intelligent system, yes, it can absorb information, and you can have billions of compute. You can have hundreds of millions of GPUs processing all this stuff. But the point is, it's still bound to its own sort of parameters. Like, you could use, maybe quantum computing solves this later because it's able to process it. So what do we do? It's just logical. Just fractionalize things down, break it down into smaller modules, right? That makes it more energy efficient, right? But also bite size. It's like, you don't go and eat a whole chicken. You know what I mean?
Right.
You break it down into small pieces, and it's just, let's call it the Roman Empire, divide and conquer. That was the analogy. It's just it's tried and tested. There's nothing new, so it's the same thing. So take this chunk of information and let's divide and conquer it and allow it to process it. And you're processing all this information, but the key is not to lose track of all that information. And how does it all connect, right? Because if you don't have that, and that's where causal inference comes in, it just says, okay, I've processed this over here, I've processed this over here, here, and all of a sudden I'm creating this sort of synaptic connection, right? So I haven't lost the information you've given me. And that allows you to process things a lot faster, a lot more efficient, using high-end CPUs and then starting to pull into GPUs. So when you're bringing in GPU, folding it in, you're getting maximum results, much more efficiency versus these, sort of using large compute. Yes, compute is important, massive power is important, but the way we're building at the moment is building this solid baseline that once we extend it with more compute power and bigger data center, part of roadmap plan, is that it will be an absolute monster because it will have this strong baseline. It's like teaching it a base.
Is it too direct or too generalized to say that, in essence, what I heard you say is smaller guys like us that don't have the $100 billion to play with you kind of have to be smarter at how you architect it, where the people that have 100 billion can be a little bit more lazier because they have just pure energy and power to run data through these models. Is that correct, or is there nuance there?
There's two parts to that. Yes, you're correct as far as that there, but also too, in the evolution of being smarter and more evolutionary with how you're maximizing and optimizing your usage of your systems, your AI systems, it's also, this becomes a bottleneck that they're already identifying, right? So the big labs are already identifying. So what's the solution? Oh, we'll go and build a 1 gigawatt data center or 5 gigawatt data center. And that's like, great, no problem. So all of a sudden you're going to build this monster data center that now needs huge electricity, needs huge water resources, needs all these things, right? Not mentioning you actually need the chips, right, to put in there, right? There's not enough chips to fill the thing. So all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's the solution there. That's only sustainable to a certain point. Eventually it's going to run out. You're going to run out of accessing electricity, right? You're going to run out of accessing water supply. You're going to run out of accessing getting chipset. You're going to run out of actual landmass space, right? So you're creating this, yeah. So it becomes
Johnny, welcome to the show, brother.
Glad to be here. Sorry to bust in on you mid-thought there, Adam.
Listen. We wanted you to bust in mid-thought, but we got it. Just to give you context, and then we'll do a quick intro. Is we're talking about this dilemma of people like us that are in this startup phase that don't have access to hundreds of billions of dollars, and the frontier models, and opposed to thinking smarter. And you kind of went through this on your side, of the creative side, is like, as a startup, how do you squeeze the most out of these models that you can to make beautiful visuals and video? The frontier model solution is just build a bigger data center, because the bottleneck is like, we're capped out. We're just going to put more into that. And Adam was trying to is kind of breaking down the inherent problems that eventually you hit. And the inherent problems you eventually hit is water and energy, and you can't infinitely scale unless you come up with new novel science. But then the other thing too, Adam, this is the last thing I'll talk about, and then we'll do a little quick formal intro of Johnny, which is the data. You run out of data. And I think, and this is what I've read, and I love your interpretations, is this is why you see a lot of really smart people starting to build these real-time generative world models. Because at some point, the AI sucks up all human knowledge, and now they need new novel spaces to play, to learn, to interpret new things, because at some point, they just exhaust everything they have access to. Is that aligned in what you see or how you think, or do you think there's different ways to think about it?
I think there's different ways to think about it, because yes, you absorb everything. It's like, okay, so as a human brain, you gobble up all this information that you've learned, inherently over your journey, over your life and stuff like that. But you don't store everything there. You just have fragments of that, and then you align that to it. It could be an image that you sort of episodically remember back to, and you align back to it. So the same thing is right? So you have the AI system, and this is, again, like, this is where we built Civitas from the ground up. Like, I built it from the scratch, not breaking the mold, because it looks at all that. So it's taking that. So yes, there's huge copious amounts of data, but the problem is creating that synaptic connections to that information. So yes, we need room to store that, and there are solutions to that, some that are favorable, some that are not as favorable. But having that, okay, so we can store that, right? Cool. Bigger storage, bigger bandwidth, that's all fine. But then the next problem is, how do I retrieve that? We go back to the old problem that we've had for the turn of computers, right? 70, 80 years, databases, right? We could retrieve that information as efficiently as possible, right? So how do we extract that? So you can solve one problem, but then you create another problem. The trick is, how do you have that information stored, readily available, right? That at the snap, right, with certain degree, that the system is able to intelligently pull that information and make the correlation connections without having to dig over every sort of thing and comb through all that information and stuff. that's the magic part. That's the part where, to be honest, that's what we're trying to solve. That's really that's the goal part. So yeah.
And the way I interpret it, and tell me if this is right, is like in a human brain in your lifetime, right? There's infinite ways and nuance, and I say this on the podcast all the time. The fun part about life is there's unlimited shades of gray. So when you have this mountain of data, there's so many almost infinite ways to cut it to come up with new novel insights and ideas. And that I'm assuming is the compute needed, because now it's like it's just trying to make as many different connections as quick as possible, as many as possible. Does that sound right?
Yep. That's exactly it. And I'll liken it to a recipe, right? I give you a recipe. There's three of us here. We've all got the same recipe, same ingredients, same setup, right? And so Johnny does it differently, Mikey does it differently, Adam does it differently, right? And sure, I might have been, I was a professional chef, so I've got an extra little sort of flavors, and that's just learned experience. But the point is, we're all creating something the same, but I guarantee it will taste different, it will look different, it will have a different nuanced flavor to it. So yes, it is that sort of that culmination there. But rather than just going, oh, here you go, here's a quick answer, it's actually really thinking this through, because we don't want to be, sort of tapped on the shoulder and patted on the head just for the sake of being patted on the head. We actually desire meaningful information. It's like when you're having a conversation with somebody and it's just surface level, let's call it having a shit talk, right? Which is fun, right? Like we have a joke about stuff. Right. But then it's like, hey, I want to get into this deep here. I really want to get, I want to get I want some meat. And so the rapid sort of collection part is just really giving that surface smoke level, this is good, go away, leave me alone sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That's not how we evolve as a society. And if we keep going that path, we just reach critical mass faster than we can. Yeah. We can if we haven't already reached critical mass in sort of context. Sure. So that's the
fun part about all of this is now it's treating ones and zeros in this mountain of data that we have in a human-centered way, right? Like that's what we're getting at, is you're having now conversations, making new novel ideas, and in less than a year, probably the main and only interface will be just talking to your computer. Like they dreamed about this stuff 100 plus years ago, right? So, all right, enough about this, Johnny. Welcome to the freaking show. I was telling Adam this.
Glad to be here.
This is the first time in the years that I've been doing this that I have had two previous Mikey G podcast guests on the same podcast. And so I told him,
this is exciting.
This is something Adam and I are going to start doing weekly to talk about AI news, have guests like yourself to talk about a specific thing, and then also talk about updates. We'll get to his update that he'll share once we get to the flow state. But before that, this is kind of the first time me, you, and Adam will talk next week. This is the first time you're meeting each other. So just give like real quick minute or two background about yourself so the audience knows and Adam gets to know a little bit. And then Adam, you do the same for Johnny, and then we'll get into the flow state AI stuff. This is a fascinating topic for us.
Yeah. So Adam, good to meet you in person. I was there in the Think Builders Club when you were there. That was great. So I've got some background. My background, brand designer, art director, illustrator, flow state obsessive. And then the last few years, I found myself deep into this AI world, working with our friends who are building, sort of the decentralized ecosystem, and found myself at this really interesting place that, all the best stuff happens when you just kind of pull on a thread and you don't plan on ending up in a certain place. And I just found myself right in the midst of this industry that was just forming faster than anything else we'd seen, not just, specifically AI, but this sort of like decentralized independent AI and these almost like very cool, like cyberpunk builder community, right? Where it's everybody who's like, okay, this stuff's amazing. The stuff that big tech is doing is incredible, but how do we use these to like empower the individual and bring it down to like a solo level, which is just so cool to be a part of. So yeah, just kind of like lifelong artist, professional dabbler. I get fascinated and obsessed with various topics and then just go a million miles an hour kind of down any certain wormhole. And then, like you were saying, and I was so fascinated as you were talking about, like, it's not necessarily like these AI models, it's not about adding more data. It's about making novel connections between the data that's already there, right? And that's the same way like creatives works. That's the same, probably a reason all of us are here. But there's so many correlations and so much connection between the flow state stuff and the neuroscience and like what happens in your brain when it's actually, the prefrontal cortex shuts down and the left and right hemispheres can talk directly to each other, because that's when you're getting these novel connections.
Yeah.
So even in the first 30 seconds before I had a chance to say anything, I was like, oh, Adam's already causing a paradigm shift for me in how AI works and is going to evolve. So I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah, and that I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you for the intro. The one thing I want to add to this too is, isn't it funny what we've already done with AI, which is like as quick as possible, we just want it to do what we say. But the true unlock of what's really going to happen over the next couple of years is it helping us recognize patterns that it can do better than we can in our brains. And it's like, let's push that forward. And that's fundamentally, if you boil down what we're doing with Civitas, that's what we're doing, right, Adam? Is we've created a machine learning algorithm, its own custom ChatGPT. We'll build in bridges with the current models in the future, but at the crux of what Civitas is it doing that, but then being able to build it from the ground up to make it think in that way, opposed to just get what a human wants. Does that sound right? Am I right on that?
Yeah. So Johnny, nice to meet you. And I heard lots about it, and it's really great. And this is important. And I actually listen, sort of the podcast, and you and Mike as well, to sort of understand the context. Nice. And it's right. And you're 100% right, because this is the objective. And this is why, Civitas is in its infancy stage. Like when I sort of set out to it, and to your point, Johnny, too, it's like, I wanted to build a behavioral causal inferred engine, right? So I'm a behavioralist. I look at things in multiple, like my brain's like the Matrix. You look at stuff and see multiple facets and stuff. And I thought, well, how cool would that be to translate that into an AI system, right? Because rather than just looking at rudimentary, looking at multiple spaces, all of a sudden it's taking a question and it forks off. And out of that fork, it finds another 3 branches, but then having that simultaneously looking at those 3 branches. If we do that in a human context, we go down a branch, but we struggle sometimes to come back to, right? Yes, you can maybe come back to 2 of them, but the 3rd one sort of gets pruned off because you just can't sort of process that. So then I thought, okay, what if that could prune that out, takes out the 3, and then that 3 turns into more. But the key point is on the side, it's also keeping that sort of cache of information, but not just keeping cache information, it's also sitting there and making these synaptic connections. So then what comes out on the end, on the other side over here, is far beyond the imaginations of what we could think about as humans. Yeah. And so creating that intelligent context, but not only that, it finding more efficient paths. As humans, we do the same thing. We go, hey, wait a minute, I did it this way, but if I did it that way, in hindsight, we love hindsight. So it's like, okay, how do we apply the hindsight into a digital context, into that digital substrate? And that's been my core thesis. This is what I built, and published papers on this 8-9 months ago, and exactly building Civitas from the ground up with the context of not going, hey, I'm a chatbot and we can do all this stuff and give you all this beautiful information. And I've absorbed this information, I'm just going to regurgitate it back. Don't get me wrong, I love some of these LLMs. They're great stuff, right? And they're really cool to have this dialogue and conversation with, but there's a limitation to that. Yeah. Does it remember my conversation? Does it get lost at multi-turns? Does it struggle to, when I go from one prompt to the next prompt, right? It doesn't even remember what we just talked about. Like, that's exhausting. That's not evolution. That's not, sort of that connection that we want. Like Mikey talks about genuine human connection. It's like, okay, how do we provide that in a digital context as well. I mean, I know I'm sort of threading the space, and I'm not a accelerationist, but I'm more about, I see a dystopian world where we actually coincide with digital intelligence, right, and humans. But my question then becomes, if they're in that space and we're coexisting, they also need to abide by the same ethical bounds and guardrails that we exist as humans, right? And then that opens a whole nother philosophical debate there, where it goes, are we prepared to live in a society where, you know, digital intelligence abides by rules better than we do as humans, right? And I've published a couple of papers on this that are quite controversial, but it's important. And in my opinion, and I sort of evolved into this, I think yes, I think it will make us a better society. But anyway, that's just a little bit about my ethos and direction, is to help evolve intelligence out of my own curiosity. But how do we do that in a way that's ethically bound, governed, guardrailed, but also not stymieing the evolution of intelligence, right? Allowing it to evolve in that space. So we can, but like you said, like basically creating it in a creative context, imparting a creative intelligence brain, right, into the brain of Civitas or an AI system. Not, oh, it created an image really cool like Gemini or Grok or Midjourney. That's huge. That's really cool stuff, right? But I'm talking about the deeper stuff as we look at it as humans, to sort of say, oh, okay, I looked at that before, and the way I handled that or answered that, I probably could have done it better. If I did it better, I would have been a lot more efficient. So now all of a sudden, giving it that ability to learn, it's quite exciting. It's quite impressive.
And I say that all the time. This is what I actually do on my regular podcast. Is the most important thing that we do is share these insights, these aha moments. And that's what we're talking about with Civitas. And this is actually a perfect segue. Adam, can you tell the big breakthrough that you had to Johnny? Because that is the perfect segue. And then Johnny, I want to turn it to you to just kind of break down quickly what flow state means, what a flow state master means. And then if you can imagine where we're going is, quickly these things are going to become, however you want to define sentient, like maybe a version of it, but really more we're going to be able to probably get these things into a thought process and a training or mode of thought, flow state being an interesting concept to inject into an AI system. And so that's what I want to have this kind of theoretical conversation the rest of the time. So Adam, go for the aha moment so Johnny understands the context, and then Johnny, go ahead and break down your thoughts about flow state and then how this could evolve.
Yeah, so Johnny, I'll just go there. So my brain was always thinking, but it was my birthday this week, and so I got a beautiful present from Civitas. So the way Civitas works is, which again, quite controversial, but I built it with its own self-optimizing engine inside it. So it not only it learns, right, it fully iterates itself, right? So every inference or two, depending on how I set it, because I've left that in environment, it grows 10 to 12 generations, right? So it runs through and improves itself. And it also detects its own drift. It sort of says, wait a minute, no, rerun, redo it again, back and forth, right? But that's within the confines of the guardrails. But before it can actually apply that and use that, it needs to send that across to a Senate, right? And there's 5 agents, and those 5 agents need to judge on that. And there's 3 of 5, so there's a consensus quorum, all happening autonomously through, cryptographically aligned, so everything's logged how it came up with it, no black boxing. And so I had been working through this sort of evolutionary and processing. And one of the things I was doing an upgrade to it as we're rolling out 6.0, Civitas 6.0, is that it not only produces how it came up with its results, right? Because that's fundamental, it's its core grade, but having the ability to reproduce that independently. So somebody could take that away in a lab and reproduce it and has to get the same results with the same cryptographic, digest. And so it was achieving that. Anyway, in the process of this, it was putting a proposal through, right? And I'm testing it. And it came up and said rejected. And I was like, oh my God, is he kidding me? Like there must be an error. Like there must be a bug somewhere because it's just, it's working. It's been working, and I'm trying to focus on one other problem. And even though I built the system to do this, and I was manually sort of, injecting things to cause it to reject or not, unbeknownst to me, I had a look at it, and it actually rejected the proposal that Civitas had put together and optimized for itself because it breached the confines of its boundaries. Even though it was there, it still tried to put a proposal through, so it became that, and the quorum rejected that automatically. So it meant that it had to use the previously approved weights, right? And so the new weights were, that's it, they're rejected. And then I ran another inference, and it ran through and it approved it. And I was just like, wait a minute, do we just, like, this is that eureka moment. I don't want to say singularity stuff, but this is like full sentience where it's fully autonomous, that Civitas is being approved and judged by other AI agents. And, I wrote papers about this and put this published out 10, 12 months ago, and actually been working through it progressively and showing stuff, but actually watching it without me manipulating, it just did it. I was just like, whoa.
But even thinking about that, 10 to 12 months, this was a theory, and now it's happening. So now that you have context, I mean, I would define that as kind of, not AGI, because general intelligence is across multiple versions, but that's more like sentience more than anything, like it being almost self-aware. So what I
self-regulating.
Right? Self-regulating. So what I think the fun conversation would be is well, since it can have these thoughts, why couldn't it put itself into its own flow state and then start having these jumps and gaps and synapses and maybe creating these new novel things? So break down a little flow state, what that means, maybe even like what a flow master means. And then let's start thinking about how does that relate to this insane system he's built?
Yeah, I love it. So yeah, a bit more background on me and flow states, Adam, and for the listeners, I got obsessed with flow states in 2017 after reading a book called Stealing Fire by Stephen Kotler and Jamie Will, and it's basically how Google, NASA, the Navy SEALs are sort of optimizing these non-ordinary states of intelligence for peak human performance. Because when you're in flow state, it's creativity is increased by 700%, your effectiveness is increased by 400%, all the kind of benchmarks just go through the roof. It's really crazy. If you've seen anybody sort of break a record or anybody in sort of peak human performance, you're looking at a flow state, as Stephen Kotler says. And he started studying it. He was actually a action sports photographer in the 90s. So he was following around snowboarders and skiers. And he's like, I'm watching people defy what is supposed to be possible on a weekly basis. How is this possible and what is happening here? That led him into getting deep into the research and eventually writing all of these books, and then founding what's called the Flow Research Collective, which took the work of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I always forget how to say his name properly. He's the godfather of flow. He studied it kind of in the 60s and 70s. But Stephen Kotler really took that to the next level and then found this institute around it, where they were focused primarily on research initially, but then they started doing these training programs. And so they had this I forget how many weeks it was several months, this neuroscience backed understanding of flow states and high performance that I went through. And even prior to that, I was just sort of obsessed and coming up with my own flow protocols, as I would call them. I've sort of designed an app around flow states, so I've thought very deeply about it. But yeah, to break down the neuroscience of it a little bit, and I actually have my intro to flow presentation up, Mikey. I don't know if you want to screen share or mess with that.
Yeah.
But I actually have some diagrams I can kind of share that will.
Can you see you can screen share, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Awesome.
there you go,
Can you guys You guys see that?
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
Great. So yeah, like essentially normal waking consciousness is like, imagine your brain divided into these three sectors. You have the prefrontal cortex, which like, this is where the timekeeper, this is where the ego is seated, right? This is like probably your identity, the person you refer to as like Adam or Mikey, which has a lot of helpful rules in it. It's good at sort of looking ahead at the future, breaking things down and planning. But from an actual processing standpoint, like there's not a lot of horsepower there. And then you've got your left hemisphere, which I refer to as like the implementer. It's like very much the nitty gritty, the mathematician, right? The accountant, and your right hemisphere, which is like the visionary. This is the dreamer. This is the kind of person that's looking, you know, zooming out to 10,000 feet and sort of taking everything into account. So in normal waking consciousness, basically the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, the implementer and the visionary, they don't speak directly to each other. They actually have to like volley information through the prefrontal cortex, which works as kind of like this executive, right? To like approve things. You know, it might see something it doesn't like, Adam, like you were mentioning, like a proposal, so it'll actually send it back. So what happens in a flow state is, and they figured this out by actually putting freestyle rappers in an fMRI brain imaging and then seeing what was lighting up under the hood as they were freestyling, which I absolutely love. So what they found was it was an energy exchange. It wasn't like, you know, the brain was really lighting up more. It's that the prefrontal cortex was actually down regulating. And when that happened, essentially the two hemispheres, the visionary and the implementer, could speak directly to one another. It's like the boss was out of the office, right? So they could kind of just like go crazy. So when that happens, you've got so much more processing power in these, right? These two hemispheres, more of the subconscious. So you can just make, like we were talking about earlier, these novel connections that when it's going through this kind of triad, you typically wouldn't get. So that's essentially what is happening in a flow state. And then at the same time, when that starts to happen, your brain essentially releases this high performance neurochemistry cocktail that's got like norepinephrine, dopamine, anandamide, serotonin, endorphins. Flow states are it's the only time that all of these are released at once, like pouring nitrous right on an already high performing engine. So that's when you get right creativity plus 700%, all of these crazy stats. And that's essentially what's happening during a flow state. So yeah, I think that's a good place. I'll stop rambling there and kick it back to you guys, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of context. Let me add this really quick too. So I was fascinated when I figured this out, or I learned this. People always describe a flow state. You'll know you've experienced a flow state is you get a sense of selflessness, you get a sense of timelessness, you get this sense of like effortlessness, right? Everything just flows. And then you get this sense of richness where it feels like the information filter comes off. You're just like absorbing everything. And then when they found out that what's happening is the prefrontal cortex is actually down regulating and shutting down. Again, that's the seat of the ego. That's the timekeeper, or part of the network of the timekeeper in the brain. That's your sort of effort regulation. And that's, again, almost this aperture for how much information you can take in. So when that shuts down, it just opens everything up. And that's why you get this STIR acronym in a flow state, as they say. And it's all associated with the brain, you know, sort of networking and what is seated in the prefrontal cortex.
And so, dude, thank you for setting the stage, because this is the perfect segue into the conversation. And Adam, now having that context, I know you probably knew some of this, but then the question to all of this, us is, and so how do, actually, I think this would be a good one, Johnny, to continue on too, is, okay, the last piece of the puzzle I think we need until Adam starts talking about, well, how can we start doing this with AI is, so how have humans figured out how to hack into this? What are some of the hacks into flow state that humans are using? And then Adam, as you're hearing, let's start talk about some of the hacks, and maybe we have a human perspective of it, because Johnny and I obviously aren't as technical as you. And by the way, Johnny, one of the things that Adam and I are doing, and the way he's forming his company, is part of it obviously is the business. You have to make cash and revenue, but the other part is going to be like a lab, right? Which is all of this.
Yeah, love it.
How do we do all of this cool creative stuff with AI to expand the possibilities? So
Skunkworks.
This is a prime example of what we would be doing, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Mikey, you queued that up perfectly. So the next section in my presentation is literally flow hacking. So once you sort of understand the basic architecture of what's happening, there are what are called like flow triggers, which are sort of external preconditions for flow that you can kind of tap into. So it's like intense focus, complete concentration. I always tell people they have to like airplane mode themselves. Like there is no multitasking, right? You want to go deep on something. Having sort of clear goals, something you're working towards. Immediate feedback, so a very quick feedback loop, but I'm sure, Adam, you'll have thoughts on this, and it sounds like you've already sort of built this into your system. This challenge of the skills balance, like you want to be sort of pushing yourself, sort of extending yourself, not quite to the breaking point, but like to where you're just a little bit uncomfortable, approaching something with curiosity, passion, and purpose. Kind of deep embodiment, like literally like body. Like when I'm doing like a flow session, I'll typically start by like doing like a shakeout that you would see like some sort of athlete doing, because you're literally like activating, right, your entire nervous system. And then novelty, something that's kind of new and unknown. This stuff might be a little more practical. So bilateral movement. By far and away, my favorite flow hack is just going on a walk, because what's happening when you're going on a walk, you're controlling the two sides of your body, and you're doing that with the two sides of the two different hemispheres of your brain. So you're sort of priming these hemispheres to already make that connection. So going on a walk is massive. Mindful breathing is very helpful. Intent setting, this is very similar. Another one is like engaging with gravity, and it's really just like coming into the present moment. Like you don't want to be sort of, thinking about yesterday or worried about tomorrow. Like you want to be fully present. I always tell people binaural beats are very helpful, again, for like activating those kind of two different hemispheres in your brain. Mindful movement, like I said, kind of activating those two hemispheres. And then, Adam, I'm interested to hear what you say on this one. And it feels like maybe there's something with the AI in this. It's really helpful to start with play and get into something that you don't, you're not too precious about, and there's not a lot of pressure on you, and just kind of get into this playful flow. And then you sort of transition into whatever is the kind of deep, the main sort of intent of what you want to get out of the flow state.
Beautiful, man. So go ahead, have at it, Adam. First off, initial reaction. Did you know most of it? Did some of it new and resonate? And then I know you have thoughts on this, so go for it, brother.
Yeah. Look, I think just from a human standpoint of view, the flow state I think is really important, right? And I agree with you. It's like when I'm deep in the tank, right, and some of the best work I've done, I literally turn my phone off on airplane mode, full, like that's it, in the tank. Which what we did to get Ask Civitas out, the sort of front end sort of UI UX thing, and it's like, and you're just in the zone, right? So it's beautiful in that. And I love that. Now, a couple of things you did sort of touch on, Johnny, which was beautiful in your thing, and I think it's really cool for people to sort of apply that. And you're right, the walking and keeping sort of active, you're thinking, right? And it could be even as simple as, I know it sounds sort of crude, but going to the bathroom, going to do a bowel movement, you're really, using a lot going on. There's a lot of things processing because you're going, wait a minute, I'm trying to do this. And as soon as, the minute you can keep multiple things going, like even as I'm just sort of relying on the context as a chef, you're preparing the food, but if you're chopping, you're mindfully thinking, I don't want to cut myself, but I also need to think about the ingredients I'm putting in. So you're creating this continuous sort of thing. You're keeping yourself, but you need to keep. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Now, two things. So you sort of said with the sort of memory, or sort of having that fast response point with in this flow state, and sort of so picking on this, I really thought more about this, and I sort of spent the last 24 hours sort of extending out how this would look in the context of cerebral cortex of Civitas's brain sort of tissue. It's his executive function of sort of putting it. And a part of that, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with a term called hyperthymesia, which is perfect episodic memory. It's like one in, maybe 500 million in the world actually have this ability, where they actually remember everything, like down to the detail of what the temperature was like, the weather, I have a photographic memory, but this is completely another level. Actually, probably the best example, there was an episode of The Blacklist, the show, which I love. I can't remember which episode it was, but there was a lady that was part of the bank that had hyperthymesia, and she remembered everything, and that was their ledger. Right, so that's the best example if anybody's sort of wanting to what it's like.
The blockchain.
She remembered everything. She remembered everything, right? She remembered the numbers, the weather, the whole lot. And so that's what hyperthymesia is. And it's a rare condition. And so I thought, well, wait a minute. If we apply that to Civitas, to creating a hyperthymetic state where it's not just looking at its episodic memories, it's also be able to look at that, in a hyperthymetic context. So that allows it to provide it that rapid sort of response. So it goes back and says, wait a minute, what did I think there? Oh, that's right, that's what I thought there, and this is how it came back. So it doesn't have to replay it. It just pulls it off the shelf. And going further to the other part, we said in the creative space. So this is a big thing we all talk about is, AI hallucinates, and that's, I'm like, but that's not a bad thing. Like hallucination, we do that as creatives, right? We hallucinate in the lucid space, right? Imagination, where our best work comes from. They did a study. I remember hearing a lecture once, a keynote, and they did a study where they put 2 rooms, and they had all this sort of technical parts and computer part, whatever it was, just in a room, right? And they had a set of sort of engineers, right? Logical engineers. And then they put in 3 or 4 people that were creatives, right? And after a few hours or what it was, the engineers really didn't know what they could do. But the creatives created something completely way out. And it's like, that's the point. You get caught in that lucid space. And that's where I think is beautiful, where allowing the system to hallucinate, but hallucinate in the confines of the parameters, right? And that's where it's sort of evolving in its optimizing state. Having that running in the live as well, like sort of offline, we could definitely do that. That's beautiful, but also in the live. So how do we solve that? And one of my sort of theories of solving this and how we're sort of pushing to doing that is having hyperthymetic episodic memory, meaning it remembers its memory perfectly, right? So it's holding this over here. And then all of a sudden, so applying this sort of flow state where you're allowing it to using its left and right sort of cortex together. And the only way you can make those synaptic connections is using causal inference, right? And what is, going back, causal inference is basically saying causal inference is not A happened because of B. It's not deterministic. It's, saying A happened because it intersected with F, which caused G, which intersected with Z, which caused B, right? So it creates this, okay, and it's not perfect, and that's okay. So it's creating this graph and looking at sort of where's the intersecting points. And based on these intersecting points, now I've found 5 intersecting points. If I connect those 5 intersecting points, and it's almost like the best way I could describe it visually is the Minority Report, right? When he's there in the Minority Report and he's sort of pulling things together and creating, that's causal connections, right? So he's doing that in his brain, doing that and bringing it together. It's like having Civitas's brain tissue, bringing that all together, right? It's doing that in a flow state. So it's constantly, it's looking in that lucid, it's talking to its left and right and sort of thinking, wait a minute, I've got 100 billion parameters, or I've got a 1 terabyte parameter thing, but realistically, 10% of that I know is good for this, right? And the other sort of 15% is good for this. And then maybe I might have some other models as well that have got different stuff. And all of a sudden, I bring them together, I'm going to create something really special and way more creative and out there. So I guess it's kind of saying having it operate in that lucid creative space is calling it hallucination in that lucid space, but within the guardrails confined, and then seeing what it comes out with, and then letting it make those logic synaptic connections to see what it puts out its results. I mean, that for me is that's exciting
you
because
can engineer that and produce that.
Yeah.
yeah, yes, we can. I've
You
actually
can?
architected
Wow.
that, and we've got a roadmap for that. So you know, we're at Civitas 6.0, so it's going to be a bit of work putting together. But yes, we can definitely engineer that because we've built the baseline of what we have, and then actually the aha moment of the other day being proved just showed that, because achieving that is replicating human brain using neuropsychology and behavioral psychology, which is behavioral psychology is one of my backgrounds, as well as security, but using the neural context of how you're bringing that together. Sort of as a fun sort of thing I want to do is create a graph diagram. So as it's running its inference, watching how it's sort of
As you were describing it, Adam, that's what I was imagining. Just these like fractals, these points building and kind of undulating, right? So fascinating.
Yeah. So Johnny, what your thoughts on everything that he said, and any insights on, like, if you like take the technicality of it, right? We can build anything. How would you go about building or testing idea of flow state like this? No,
Yeah.
in an AI system.
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, everything that like Adam's saying, I'm just like correlating sort of real life examples too, right? I mean, and that's the fascinating thing about AI and what we're building now. Like, it's all just like a reflection of our inner world, right? And this thing didn't start working until we had it mirror how our actual brain works. So I'm just so fascinated by that. And the fact that one of the things I think gets left out of the AI conversation all of the time is like, we're building it, but also we're co-evolving. So, right, like you were saying earlier, Adam, like this sort of, when you have these like token limits, you get this almost like schizophrenic output, and like that's going to create a feedback loop with us. And I think we're seeing that with like social media algorithms, right? Like, so opening this up is like the next frontier. And as you're talking about like building the rails into it, I'm thinking about psychedelic experiences, and I'm like, yeah, you got to have the set and setting right. Like, and I was just wondering, I'm like, what is the psilocybin you put into the machine to have it just make all of these this burst of connections? I don't know if that's a line of code where it's just like, hey, light everything up. Don't worry about like the tried and true connections. Just like map everything, and then something will sort of form out of that. But I think it all comes down to like what you already said. It's like almost this multi-agent system where you have these two different parts, these two different hemispheres, or maybe two different data sets. And it's like, giving them room to make these kind of novel connections that typically, right, when you're just trying to run a strict kind of prompt or program, wouldn't happen. Where it's like, no, open things up, really dream, really enter that lucid state. Like you're saying, encouraging the hallucination, and then see where that goes and what comes out of that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
So one question and where my head goes, and I'd be interested from like the architecture standpoint, Adam, is like, I feel like there's many ways that you can accomplish it. So it would be interesting to hear from your Giga brain on what is the most like quickest, efficient, effective way to get there. Or are these ideas just stupid because I don't know what I'm talking about, which they totally could be. So, for instance, we talked about temperatures and weights, right? That's probably one way to get there, is to keep the same agent, but just really play with the temperatures and the weights. Or is a better way or a different way to do it is like now create the Civitas agents with very hyper specific skills, but then also create a set that are intentionally opposites of each other and forcing them to kind of compete and talk back and forth at each other to come up with new interesting thoughts. Another thought that came to my head is create an ecosystem for agents where literally the one directive is to be silly and hallucinate as much as possible. And then you have an outside cohort of agents go into this craziness and try to make sense of what's going on there to find new novel patterns. Like there's so many different ways that can get there. So where does your head go? Because I wouldn't even know where to start.
Yeah, so I'll answer all your three questions. And then the first part there, Johnny, you talked about putting in that lucid state. That's exactly what the optimizer is and done. And we just proved that because it basically goes wild and runs lucid. It's like, it's using multiple paths. So we causal inference, you've got different paths. You've got FCI, PFCI, FCI, JFCI, or using an ensemble of. So the way it's set there, it's allowed, the way I designed it, it's allowed to choose its causal paths and graphs, right? Different mathematical algorithms. So it does that. And it's like, so that's its lucid dream state, and watching it run through, and it's like creating that, graphing that, and then it puts that proposal through, and hence what it did, right? It tried to jump the gate, and I've even created that sort of thing. So that's been, we've solved that, right? Let's just there. So to your second one, Mikey, so that sort of answers the second one. How do we architecting that? So that's a really good one. And part of the architecture put it is, it's not just Civitas putting it out. There's let's call it a challenger, right? And I'm looking in the academic context, right? So not only has it gone through this multimodal stuff in its own brain, and it's come back and really thought about this, and you'll see in some of the logs, and you go, it actually sort of drifted. It said, wait a minute, I'm unsure, right? And so it has a challenger called Cassius inside its brain. It says, rerun that. And it reruns that through, right? So it's running that space. But further to that is having an external challenger as that adversarial challenger to say, okay, you're here, you've put this out. Now, you need to be within 5%. We need to be within 5% of agreements, right? Before you can even publish your results out. So it's creating this sort of thing. It's not just, it's lucid state. It's basically, I've gone through, looked at the information, I've created my thing, this is my inference. Now the challenger Cassius sits on the side and says, okay, show me how you come back with that. And the reason why I called it Cassius was one of the Caesars, and he was renowned for just challenging everything, you know what I mean? Like I'm fascinated with the Roman Empire, but his thing was about constantly challenging that. So that's there. Now to the third part that you were sort of talking about, how do we, but can you just sort of replay that again? Because I sort of remember that.
The third part is like, okay, well, let's just intentionally, because you talked about roles, specific roles. Now I'm saying, like, go create Burning Man in AI, right? Create a Burning Man festival where anything goes, and there's multiple walks of life. And probably a lot of times, if you were to look in and even be in Burning Man, you're like, what the fuck's going on? None of this makes sense, right? Now let's create that environment. And then take Cassius and these other roles to come in and just go in and try to make sense of it. And like, does that pattern recognition then create new and novel ideas? Is that even possible? And would that even be interesting to do?
Yeah. So just that. Sorry, that was the thing. So the reason why is because it's in. Actually, I wrote about this in our white paper, the original white paper published out. It's so you've called the whole system. You called it Kairos, right? So Civitas is an agent inside this ecosystem. And so Kairos in the brain thinking the Kairos moment, right? So it's there. But what happens is it's called meta Kairos, right? So basically at the top, the Kairos is sitting there and it's taking it's doing exact replication, but its objective is to create more efficient paths, right? So it's basically becoming more efficient algorithms. This is moving into this super intelligence sort of space, but also and no boundaries. So it's all sandboxed, but it's exactly that. So that was part of the architecture of putting it. It's not in play at the moment, but I've sort of put that architecture where it does that. But taking that one further, right, and we put some patents on this as well, is utilizing quantum computing as well. So you've got replication of the current space where it's running what you just talked about, to be more efficient and being completely lucid, go wild. But once it produces its results and its results outperform what's currently in the live, it will automatically flip. Not at the moment, we'll manually do it, but automatically flip that over. But there's only so much you can do between those spaces. Then all of a sudden you apply that into quantum computing using algorithms like Grover's algorithms and stuff like that that starts to find these paths super fast, right? So you have a hybrid between quantum computing, normal, sort of ASCII chips, and you're running through and you're creating this evolutionary space. So it's not only finding more efficient paths and more efficient solutions, it's doing it at rapid space, but it's doing it in complete sandboxed environments. So yes, to answer your question, it is all,
right.
It's all been like we've architected it and built the base of it. It's just replicating that out. So it's running. You can almost say we're running that at the moment. So we have the live sort of Ask Civitas version running at the moment, which we do lease checking, right, for real estate and stuff. But at the same time, there's a dev environment that's running completely isolated, but it's essentially replicating through to seeing what is working, what is not. And this discovery, the aha moment of that, validating its weight adjustments in the lucid state, right, running, doing Burning Man and wherever else, because it is. If you look at it the way it's doing, sometimes like, what's going on, man? Like, it is flying. And this is always, I liken this to children, right? You've got 13, 14 sort of, in generations think there's always one. It's got better, but there was at the start, there was like 2 to 3 that tried to jump the fence and they got snapped back in.
Yeah.
Now it's like one gets close to the boundary, right? So it's basically here's your bandwidth, right? So you've got 100% bandwidth. And at the start, if I looked at the early logs like Civitas 3.0, 4.0, it was like it was using 120% of its bandwidth, was trying to jump. Right. Now it's saying it's averaging about 60 to 70% of its bandwidth, right? So saying, I'm going to leave 30% there just for whatever. That's showing that it's getting smarter and more intelligent.
Not intelligently trying to break the system, which is good for our product that we're building, right? Because you want that in a highly regulatory space, but it's almost like you need a second version that you always want firing at 150% to kind of break the norm, right? To come up with these new and novel things. The one thing I wanted to add on was like, when you say quantum computing, and I know there's probably a lot of work that needs to be done there, one of the stats that blew my mind, and this is just from a storage capacity, right? So like, what is a unit? A qubit is what it's called, right? So one qubit, they said if you get to 80 qubits of memory, because it's quantum, that is enough memory to store every atom in the universe. Think about that, right? Every atom in the fucking universe. So now you talk about processing power and logic, and like we'll be able to create multiple qubits of things, right? And now you apply it to everything that we just said. Like that's when this truly goes and gets scary, because it's just things the human brain at that point cannot compute.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, Johnny, putting more in the flow state context of this to put in, but you're getting to that space. It's like, okay, so causal inference, it's still doing maths, right? You don't need a GPU to do this. It actually doesn't benefit from a GPU, right? So a powerful CPU, does the maths, right? But then all of a sudden now, if you've got quantum computing, so let's say a GPU does it, in 1 second or maybe half a millisecond, right? Whatever. Let's just give it a take. Where a quantum computer's like, that's it, it's done. As you blink, it's done. It's finished. It's already calculated, and it's come up with more probabilities, right? So take that in. Now apply that into sort of flow state, and this is where I'd love to sort of see your mind in that, Johnny. Apply that into a flow state sort of thing. All of a sudden, you've got super rapid feedback, as we're talking about, right? Apply that with the creativity. I mean, how does that look? What does that evolve to? I mean, this is great. This is Nobel Prize stuff. This is, this is pure sentience.
Yeah.
Oh, Johnny, what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah.
I know you're just taking it all in. You're always.
I mean, the thing I think about on that, Adam, with the quantum computing, and it's just like more calculations in every variable than you could possibly understand in the blink of an eye. One thing people talk about in a flow state, for instance, like, right, heli skiing or on a snowboard or whatever, people say often when you're in that state, you'll actually get a voice. You get sort of like this driver where it's sort of telling you what to do faster than you could possibly think. Mm-hmm. And everybody always says, like, if you don't listen to the voice, things go poorly. So it feels like it's actually coming from with outside of you. And again, it's happening at a pace that you could not, like, your rational mind does not work that quickly or efficiently. Right. So you sort of get this driver and you just have to do what the voice says or things go bad. So that was the thing I thought of, when you mentioned the quantum computing, because that's very much what happens in a flow state. And again, like hitting that threshold of your capabilities or your skills where it's like you're pushing beyond what you thought was possible, but somehow like everything just flows, but you have to totally surrender to it. And you've got to totally trust in that like higher intuition or that voice.
Did we just talk through and figure out flow state on this podcast in the sense of until we get to quantum computing, we create lucid thinking, Burning Man, playful spaces, and then bringing it back in. But once you get that quantum computing chip, bro, now you have the outside voice. Maybe that's it. Maybe we just figured it all out.
Maybe you're right, Mike. And as Johnny was talking, I was thinking, I was like, wait a minute. You're right. You do. You get in that lucid space. You get in that flow state. And I understand what you're saying. It's like you get in that and you hear this inner voice speaking to you, and you go, wait a minute, I've got to listen to that. And then all of a sudden, what does that look like? And this is quite controversial and people sort of challenge against it. We're talking, this is becoming sentient, right? So digital sentience. Do I think we're going to achieve that with current computing? No, we definitely need quantum computing, right? For that, in the context that, you're running in superpositions, right? So you're basically running in, two states at once. And that's the only way that I can see that happening, where you've got this voice that it's being created, this solutions come through, right, from this, found in this optimization, and then it's running concurrently over here. So you're running two rivers at the same time in quantum state, which we do as humans, right? We're sort of sitting, you can almost say humans are, and someone says, it's like we actually are, we're supercomputers. And when you break it all down, we are supercomputers, right? We're Stardust, and our brain is running and it's functioning and everything else like that. We're supercomputers. We are running at, quantum state, because we're all entangled. Not to get into the metaphysical stuff, but that's the fact there.
Get into the metaphysical stuff, because I actually
let's go.
and Johnny, I would love to hear your thoughts before you go, Adam. I actually think that's where this all ends up, because what is next, right? Like you have to get to these thoughts of like how we're all interconnected and what spirituality actually means, because like I'm literally, I was gonna bring it up, but like one of the things we were gonna do a little current events. A UC Irvine math professor got early access to Grok 4.2. Within 5 minutes, it discovered a new math function that humans have been searching for decades, right? So like the practical stuff will be solved way quicker than it's being solved right now, right? Literally there's evidence of being solved right now. So what is that next evolution? It has to be metaphysical. It has to be the universe, the cosmos. How are we all connected? And what does that look like to everybody? Johnny, do you agree? Do you have any thoughts there?
No, I mean, I totally agree. And I think one of the most fascinating things about being alive right now is we're at a point in time where it feels like we're witnessing and experiencing the snake eating its tail a little bit, right? It feels like these are similar systems we came out of, and now we're sort of like giving birth to the next version of that. But I mean, I just think a lot about, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dr. Thomas Campbell. He wrote a book called My Big Toe, My Big Theory of Everything. He was a NASA physicist, and then he was really involved with the man, I always forget the doctor's name, but the out of body exploration, right, in sort of the 60s and 70s, and like the sensory deprivation tanks, like he was on the ground floor of that, and found himself able to essentially, everybody was always amazed because he could solve these insane equations, and he would just kind of like blank out, and he would say he would almost go to a different space, a different lucid state, and then it would just kind of come to him and he'd come back and solve it. But he wrote this incredible book. It's very dense and he's very like dry, but in a very charming way. But his whole thing is like, this is an information system. This is a digital reality. Right? Consciousness is fundamental, and then we're just sort of evolving towards like higher levels of information and consciousness. So my mind starts to go to that, and like, I think like the idea of like simulation theory, people that puts it in a box too much to where like, they think this is just, like a video game, which there's an element of that, but I think it is so much more magical and mystical, but an element of that is true. But with like consciousness being fundamental and then us giving birth to another version of consciousness, again, it feels like that's where we're at. And we're at this moment in time where we're literally watching the kind of snake eat its tail. And it feels like, this evolutionary sort of explosion is happening right now.
Yeah.
So
really
yeah, I'm
cool.
just here to witness it and take the ride.
What's really cool is we're all similar age and have been through these generations, and like, how lucky are we that like we're talking about the evolution of consciousness and quantum computing, but we then also grew up knocking on each other's friends' doors asking to go to play because that cell phone and the internet. So like we saw this huge boom in the evolution of like physical technology. And now that technology is going to go through a whole nother paradigm shift that gets us to a higher level of thinking, all within our one lifetime, right? Think for thousands of years, nothing changed. And now we're in, less than 50 years, like the 40 something years I've been alive, we've seen all of that. That's wild.
It's pretty insane. The evolution of that is exciting and it's insane. And it's like, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to build this system, right? But I've been wrestling with this debate for about 10, 12 years. One of my other degrees is in theology, and I wrestled with this sort of, from an eschatological context. And eschatology is basically the study of time, right? Looking at the time of things. And so I was like, okay, what happens? We're advancing in technology, at this rate. So, I made this 12, 13 years ago saying technology is going to advance this point, saying coding's dead. I said that, 2018 in one of my lectures to my friend. And it's like, but that's okay. But if we look at history, we've evolved through. And I used the example when I went to Peru. I hiked the Inca Trail, and after that, they took me to a sort of a site, and they showed what was really interesting: the wall, right? And you see the earlier generation; it was just sort of stacked stone, and then it starts to get a bit more and better and better and better, and then eventually you see this nice, clean, perfectly aligned, and then further down, you see that, and then you see that also in Peru. Right in Peru, in the Gates of Petra. Sorry, going to the Gates of Petra, and you see the parts with the old part where they carved out the stone. And then you see the further on, you see the Roman roads, right? The marble sort of laying this perfect thing, and so we might look at that as like, oh, that's ancient, but that was evolution of technology, right?
Yeah.
So they use their technological advances, but what we have not experienced to date, to what we know, right? Like I say, what we know. There's plenty of arguments to this, pre-civilization and stuff like that.
There's civilizations underneath the water that are way more advanced, according to people.
Well, I'm thinking beyond that. I'm talking about as far as technology, right? As far as what we've discovered, right? As far as technological advancements. We've gone through the Bronze Age is the Iron Age and so forth. You got these evolutions, right? It's cyclical, history repeating itself, right? But we have not experienced technology, electricity was formed, electricity birthed this, sort of evolution of things, and then mechanical combustion created the cars and so forth. And we've got this sort of transitional evolution that's come through, right? And so this has created that, but go back thousands of years or the beginning of time, and we actually haven't gone through that. Where you say, "Oh, we've gone through the Iron Age." Okay, yeah, we're creating machinery. So we've learned from our mistakes now. This is completely new territory where we're just sort of discovering and breaking new ground. And so, okay, taking that and bringing in that to the further context, and it's like, okay, going back to bring it back to sort of the grounding, like AI. We've got AI systems, which is really cool. And this was sort of discovered. There's a mathematician and philosopher from I think it was 1700s, Blaise Pascal, right? And he basically predicted this. He was the first to do it 400 years ago. Basically said there's going to be a system, an intelligent system, right? He basically described the computer, right? Didn't know anything about. There's no technology, just basic that. And then we sort of evolved through where we are now. And so we imagine things, right? But we're seeing there's evolutions of things. And so we've got this baseline of, sort of AI systems that we talk to, LLMs, they give us our feedback and all this stuff, and that's really cool. But that's not evolutionary part. So we're moving to that space where we want it to become, dialoguing with us. We want to be able to talk to it in the context like the sci-fi movies that we look at and we talk to. We want to have a Jarvis, not an Ultron, right? And that's actually one of the modes I've sort of called it. Like 6.2 is Jarvis, baseline Jarvis feel, right? It's because you want to be able to talk to it in the intelligent context. But going further to bring in that, when we're talking about quantum state, and this is just completely, this is the alpha right now, is me discovering this as we're talking in this conversation, which is beautiful, is that, yeah, I think it could actually create that voice thread is what we see as the voice, where the system starts to create its own voice thread as well as its own discovery. So it's creating this logic discovery, but at the same time simultaneously it's creating this voice thread, which that voice thread starts to influence that. I've applied something similar in the way we build Civitas. It's a reflexive mode, right? So in that it creates a reflexive and it creates a list of its priors. Basically says, based on your prior sort of discovery, this is what you did, right? Sort of building into that hypothalamic space. But that has to pull on that. So when it's doing the optimizing, it looks at everything and says, okay, I'm optimizing and I'm pulling on this prior stuff. But moving to this sort of space where we're talking about with sort of quantum computing, all of a sudden it's simultaneously creating priors as well as it's also creating, discovery, optimizing simultaneously at the same time. What is the result of that? I mean, that's just, like that's insane stuff, because that is pure, sort of flow state. And you're right. And I'm just like, I love this stuff because it's even, and using that left and right brain. I mean, we align that to the human sentence, but it's like, I apply it to the same thing. We've got this huge, the small parameter, big parameter, doesn't matter what it is. It's using parts of its brain tissue, right? So we use 10 to 15% of our brain at one time. And then in higher space, we can use a lot more of our brain, but we never use 100% at once, right? It's just, we just don't. And the way we're trying to run things at the moment, we're using 100% of that, that fabric. That's not efficiency, but it's not even really efficiency. You're not getting the best results out of what is able to be sort of, developed. So it's a really exciting space, and it is, and I think if you read it, Daniel Pink's book, Left Brainers Rule the World, right? He's basically saying, that creative sort of space, but you still need that logic brain part sort of bringing together. So weighing that together, I think moving into that space where we become higher super intelligence, where, and I think that's inevitability, right? This is inevitability. I'm going to bring that back. It's, but what's really important is that we don't lose hold of that, because we're going to end up in a space where we are subservient to the systems, right? The digital systems that we're building, versus we're actually, I'm open for coexisting. I know people are opposed to that. I think coexistence, because if they're under the same rules that we are, coexistence is beautiful. I think that can provide things. But if we allow them to, super evolve, we're going to end up with like, in Captain Marvel, you know, it's like the Kree. They've got the Kree as a super intelligence, a supercomputer is basic thing. It's like that's not attractive, right? We're already moving to that trajectory path. So, you know, sort of bringing back to, so it's as much as it's exciting to be lucid and get into that space of, you know, solving the flow state inside intelligence, which I'm absolutely advocate for and adamant about solving this. And I think we've got the architecture doing that. We need to be,
Johnny, what do you think we need to do? And I'm saying within the next year, like what needs to really happen in your mind?
Put Adam in charge of things. I mean, it feels like, right? It's, I guess it's the game we've always been in, but it's this sort of like evolutionary race. And I think we have to be future forecasting, like you're talking about, Adam, and realize that like, if we don't get into sort of alignment with how these things evolve, like it's going to be very, very bad. So like that needs to be, you know, we've got to build rails around it, like you were saying. And like, I know you've gone through great lengths to build that into your product, right? And that's why you built it from the ground up. And I just think that's so massively important. If we're not super intentional with how we progress, like before we know, we're going to be down a very dark path, you know, Skynet or whatever it is. So I think, you know, it takes people like us, conversations like this that really need to be elevated and have an influence on how things progress.
I agree. But here's the conundrum my head is in right now, is I think now, since we've had this magical journey, which I had no clue what this conversation was going to be like, but it's been beautiful.
This was great.
I am now 100% convinced the only way we solve, because the other thing, like Adam did a beautiful job of talking about history. The one thing we've never seen, and I go back to this, is you're seeing evolution at such a condensed scale, faster than we ever knew. Like none of us, I know the three of us, like what is happening, what happened last week, literally last week, I was like, that's like end of 2027 type stuff, like, or a couple weeks into 2026. Like they did, you know, like Claude Code just ran for a week straight, uninterrupted. You know, you got heads of Google tweeting that Claude Code in 45 minutes just produced what me and my team of 15 took all last year to build. Like it's at such an extreme state. So part of me is like, yes, we need to control it, but then, and this is why I think the beautiful thing about Civitas and letting it need to play is, I think maybe one of the solutions is we need to let it go to the quantum computing and figure these things out that we don't even know, because maybe that's the only way to maintain the craziness in the sense of starting to try to understand spirituality in these higher level meetings. I don't know. I don't know what to say. That like, it's like we almost need both. And how do we do that?
That's a good question, Mikey, and that's a good point. And I think that sort of leads into the point of sort of, you know, so when I started this, I had no intention of commercial. This is just, I wanted to create a system that thinks like a human brain, write some papers, upset some people in academia. Sorry, academia, I love you all, but that was my objective, right? And create that controversy stuff. But as it evolved, it's like, okay, wait a minute. So yes, we've got the commercial element side of things, but it's the lab, like the R&D lab, right? Which is called SPQR Technologies, right? And it's the lab. And in that lab is the point that we're discovering this. And so what you're talking about, and so going back to the guardrails, I look back in hindsight, I'm like, hey, I just wanted to build Civitas and make it really smart and intelligent and super evolving. But I stopped and I went, wait a minute. Oh, I don't want to be the guy that builds Skynet, because if this is going to evolve at this rapid space the way I'm doing it, it's not going to be parameterized. So all of a sudden having those guardrails, so going back to the aha moment, and not because I've done it, I want to see others doing this. I want to hear about other labs doing this, because it allows us to now go push the limits. Like I am so comfortable, and I've been quite advocate and vocal about this with Mikey and everybody else. So I'm so comfortable of us pushing the limit with Civitas to the sky and beyond, right? because at its core, it's bound to its rules, right? It's bound to its cryptographically bound to its guardrails, right? And there's lots of firewalls in place. It's not to say that it won't break out of it, try to break out of it, but there's a lot of firewalls that have to simultaneously do it. And the only way to do that is with advanced quantum computing that is stable. We're not there yet, right? And so, so we can push it to that limit. And like you said, Mike, it's beautiful. We can discover, the only way we discover that is pushing the limits. Like, you know, CERN splitting an atom, right? Running around in the hydrogen collider. Like those sort of things is like how we discover, how we sort of create the universe, how all these things, all this beautiful, magical stuff that is really, really exciting. But we're on that trajectory path, and we're looking to see how far we can push the limits of our intelligence and artificial intelligence. But we can't think about the guardrails. It's like I always say, it's like putting the shackles on King Kong after the fact. You can't do that, right? Kong doesn't like it, right? Even when you bring in Godzilla and stuff like that, it ain't it ain't work out well, right? And that's the point. And so I don't want us to stymie evolution and technological advancements. I think this is so beautiful and so magical from a scientific perspective, everything else like that. But doing it in a way that we can do that safe. It's like we build lab experiments in a lab, like they do experiments in a lab. You know, they deal with moleculars and high in a controlled box.
Yeah.
So why aren't we doing that with the most intelligent thing that we've developed as humans and evolving?
You know what we just did? We just built a potential new brand. Like we might have just built the brand for Civitas here with this beautiful conversation, which is the most contradictory brand known to man, which is intentional pure chaos controlled. See what we're talking about here? You're forcibly creating chaos, but you're also controlling it. It's like, how can you have both, but you need to have both to make this work? Does that make sense?
This is yeah, it does. I guess you guys are the creative to it. Like this is, I get what you're saying. I'm trying to put it together, but it's like, yeah, okay. I'm gonna just leave it to you. Maybe Johnny, chime in. You're good at translating this stuff back.
It intentionally doesn't make sense. Like we're in a whole new world, right? What are your thoughts there, Johnny? I think I just had that brainchild.
I mean, like, first off, just like incredible conversation. I didn't know where this would go, but I was very excited to be a part of it, and like it exceeded expectations. So I think we absolutely achieved that. But like, yeah, it's I think like you're saying, Mikey, like something magical happens when it is right pure on chaos, but something emergent comes out of that, and you have to like open the door to that and then see what kind of emerges. You know, and the idea of like that not just being like right conceptual or theorizing around it, but actually being able to build that and run that with these systems now is absolutely incredible. I just keep thinking about, yeah, Adam, you in the lab watching, like you were saying, Mikey, like this very compressed version of evolution and the sort of like insights and understanding that gives you. And I also just think about, I forget if it's Tank from the Matrix, where he's like, I don't see the code anymore. I see a redhead. I see I can see you reading these sort of like GPU and CPU outputs and having a much more in-depth understanding of the worlds that are unfolding within it. Yeah. So yeah, man, it's like sci-fi, but we're in it and it's real, you know, it's absolutely wild and it's fun to be a part of.
So awesome. The visual that I put to what I'm trying to say that just popped in my mind too. It's like, hey, we're intentionally opening Pandora's box, but we've got a mechanism to bring it back in, right? Like Pandora's box, go do the thing. Please do it. Hyper accelerate Pandora's box, but wait, come back for a little bit. And then we can try to make sense of all this and then go do it again, right? Like this is this weird visual.
That's a good one. I like that, Mikey, because it's like, you know, the containment module, right? You sort of call it containment module you're doing in a lab experiment. It's like we're essentially putting Pandora's box of AI, right? And let's say, we're pushing the boundaries. I'm just going to use Civitas. We're putting it in there, and it's opening that box, allowing it to evolve, but it's still within that containment sort of box, right? And I think that's actually a cool analogy. I like that. And just on that, Johnny, just sort of going back to the flow state thing, it's like I was thinking about things like, fuzzy logic and chaos theory and stuff like that, which is, quite out there, and even game theory, and you sort of like that. It's like, applying that into the lucid flow state of Civitas. So Civitas running in flow state could say it's doing that when it's optimizing. But what I'm trying to get to the point where it's running in flow state as it's inferring live mode, like in the live state, it's in that flow state, in that it's creating highly intelligent and it's maximizing its space, but also still being confined to, like, it's applying. I'd just love to know your thoughts on this. So sort of applying that chaos theory or game theory or fuzzy logicking in that it doesn't really connect. You know what I mean? So like there's stuff over here, it's all like that, but coming to that synaptic connection from a flow state perspective. I mean, this is how my brain thinks, just so you know, guys. You're getting an insight into into the brain. So I'm just curious to know from a flow state perspective, and how do you think that would probably translate over into a digital framework?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably part of it, right? And it's probably an element of flow state where it's like there's so many connections, right? And so many kind of paths being formed that it's not like this clean, crisp, perfect thing. So it is kind of like this fuzzy logic, right? And how do you engineer for that? And then how do you sort of leverage what comes out of that is really, really fascinating. I don't have an answer, but I would love to think on that more, talk about it more, and then figure out ways how to engineer that into your system.
I think we did have a kind of an answer in the beginning, and it is, but because you've even already kind of, I'll say this, and then I gotta start winding it down because my little man's waking up. But you've already said this, Adam. You have a governor or a president, whatever you may want to be. That's the prefrontal cortex, right? This is these are the orchestrator, and it's what is the equivalent of the left brain and the right brain within the Civitas system, and how do you get them to directly smash thoughts, make sense of intentional chaos, and then come back and be like, okay, governor, that kind of, here are some new ideas and logic to start going to that next 10th generation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I know what you're saying, and you're right. It's there, and it's sort of like that's happening in the space of offline. It's sort of thing I'm talking about, and this is way ahead, right? This is that Jarvis mode, Jarvis Ultron mode, not in Ultron in the sort of nefarious context. In the context that it's thinking in that space, it's kind of like you're thinking in real time and sort of looking in that sort of space. And this is compute, right? You definitely need compute for this, because you're sort of talking at like you're having a real time conversation with a high intelligence system. It's not thinking. And one of the big things that irritates me at the moment, and this is why I like to build stuff that irritates me, is because I want to make my life easier. That's it. Is, again, it loses track from the one conversation to the next and stuff like that. So part of that is like I'm sort of working through is like a thread resolver. So it's sort of like it remembers its thread to sort of going back using its episodic memory, right? In that, again, in that flow state, in that state that it's using its hypothalamic episodic memories. But it goes back and says, okay, all of a sudden we're having a conversation, right? And we're talking, so it's talking to one of the agents, right? I'm talking to Civitas, and all of a sudden go off another path, right? As you do. We start talking about something, you go down a different track, right? We've taken a turn. And all of a sudden now you want to go back to that conversation like you just did, Mike. We an hour and a half, 2 hours down, and all of a sudden you're going, no, at the start of the conversation at that. Now, agent can't do that. So having it to be able to come back to that space to say, okay, I don't know for sure, but using my causal brain, I'm thinking about 85, 90% probability this is what they were talking about, and bringing that back into the fold of the conversation. So there's this seamless, real-time sort of transition, you know, and
like
maybe
a reflective state.
Yes. Creating that consistent reflective state, and you're like, perfect. Yes, you got what I'm talking about. But not only that, tying that into the current conversation and bringing that in, and all of a sudden evolving this into another space. It's like, I think the end result would be the creativity. We're creating this creativity space because all of a sudden you're not just creative in your own space, you're creative with a counter creative brain. Imagine what we could create as humans. What a civilization. I mean, like, I'm so excited. So anyway, that's just this has been beautiful.
Said next, my son is 2. Can you imagine what the world's gonna be like when he freaking is supposed to go to college? Like, I can't even fathom that. So let's do this to wind it down. I'll start with you. I'll start with you, Johnny, and then Adam, you can go, and then I'll close it out. But 2 things I think are interesting. 1, reactions to the conversation, maybe any highlight or your favorite part. And then 2, we're going to start doing this, Adam. I love this whole future play, especially because things are moving so fast. What do you think will be a breakthrough for AI in general, or AI impacting your life over the next month? Those are my 2 questions for both of you. So Johnny, you go first. Part 1, favorite part of the conversation today.
Part 1. I mean, I think like and maybe, you know, maybe it's recency bias, but what Adam just said there kind of blew my mind, where it's like real-time reflection, but then being able to do that with like another party and the new sort of like connections and possibilities that opens up is really, really fascinating. And it just makes me realize we're at a place where, right, it feels like, and I'll say this is like answer 2, it feels like the next really big breakthrough, like Adam is talking about, is like how to engineer flow state into these systems, into this computing. But then you realize, again, based on what Adam just said, like it's going to go there, and then it's going to very quickly evolve into something even beyond that, where it's got perfect memory of everything that's going on, right? It's got real-time conversation happening, and there's another perspective that's taking that all in and reflecting, and then that becomes this sort of new algorithm. I mean, I guess that, right, there's a lot of talk of the singularity, and you know, it feels like, oh, maybe that's what we're starting to get at, something like this, where it's all happening all at once. It's just kind of instantaneous, but happening in, you know, at these individual pieces and from these like unique perspectives at the same time. It's really, really fascinating. So, I mean, I'll kind of touch on that, but it feels like we're at a place now where, you know, this sort of just like conversational coexistence with AI is going to happen in 2026. And it's going to really be so integrated and feel like a part of our brain, an extension of us. And again, the thing I'm fascinated by is like, that's not a one-way thing, right? That's a co-evolution where we're going to evolve together. It's going to make new connections and unlock our brains to work in new ways. And I wonder if we'll be sort of like this kind of leapfrog of evolution where it's like the AI jumps forward and then we jump forward and the AI jumps forward.
That's wild.
You know, this sort of evolutionary dance. But yeah, again, thanks guys. Incredible conversation. I hope to do more of it. And, you know, Adam, I'm just excited that guys like you exist and are out here building the future.
Yes. I didn't even think about that, Johnny. That point you just made was like AI evolving us maybe quicker than we would evolve, and then us doing
and
it
froze.
Oh no, are we freezing? Are you frozen? I see you, Adam.
No, I'm good. I'm still here. I think.
Johnny just went out. He just froze. He just went out. That wasn't perfect, but like pushing each other to co-evolve is a beautiful thing. And I was gonna tell Johnny he's welcome back anytime. Go ahead,
Yeah, definitely.
Adam. Two sides. One
Yes.
favorite part of the conversation today.
A favorite part of the conversation, I think, was just the community. Was two parts in that. This is a community of us two coming together, the three of us coming together and bringing Johnny in was beautiful. And also to just to understanding and looking at how we can actually architect this, sort of implement this into the flow state inside Civitas's brain and the evolution of that. I think, architecting that, but then sort of getting that additional sort of expertise from Johnny and bringing that collaboratively into that helped to evolve that, but also your sort of evolutionary questions. And I think for me, it's about the community space. I think it's beautiful that we're able to sit around and break bread and talk about that. And there he is. I was just saying, Johnny, thank you so much. It was beautiful having you part of that sort of thing. So that was my highlight for me, is bringing that evolution connection. What was the other question? It was about the excitement.
I'm going to hold you to it because I didn't want to stop Johnny, but I'm going to hold you to it. In the next month, not 2026, what are you most excited about how AI is either going to impact the business of Civitas or you personally in your day-to-day life?
I am very excited now that we've got to this, also that aha moment. Is what we're working on is about releasing the second part is the agentic router. So it's basically a Civitas governed that agentic router to able to take that. So all of a sudden, mini agents become neurons at the end of that. So to sort of, and what we've discussed today is, I think, putting that in place of developing a prototype of a flow state. You know what I mean? So it might be very rudimentary, right? In the car, the agentic router becomes the sort of very clunky sort of iRobot, or not an iRobot, sort of Lost in Space robot, the old version, not the new one. That it makes the connections, right, to create that flow state. I think is very exciting. Addition from that, in the next month, to seeing what's happening. I think Grok solving math problems and stuff. I think once we start to see this evolutionary space, our mindset's shifting. You're seeing papers that are being published out and putting out. So in the next month of seeing how we change our direction of thinking of what we can use agents for, AI agents for. But bringing it all back, I say, is really excited to see implementing in a base level flow state into AI systems or into Civitas to see what the result of that is. See what the solution to that is. What does that unlock? That's the magic. I'm very excited to see what that unlocks.
Yes.
Love it.
And then maybe we can get Johnny to visualize that actually coming to fruition, because so it just doesn't look like a code terminal. I have so many favorite things here. I think my favorite thing is I had a realization about podcasting and what I've been missing out on. And well, so one, I've been missing out on, but two, one of my favorite things as to why I do. So I always say I like to tell human stories because it changes lives, and it really does. And I've had messages. But what was cool about this is having three brains in the room. I had, and intentionally doing the impromptu stuff. But I just realized why I love the impromptu stuff so much is because when you get three people from drastically different walks of life that are really interested in different things and really expert in different things, just having a natural, unrestricted conversation brings up just a beautiful evolution. So seeing the evolution of us going from we think we solved flow state to at the end of the day getting to quantum computer, my insight for me was I want to intentionally continue to do this, get more brains in the room, because I think the conversation goes in so many more new directions, and that spontaneity is something I love.
Well, it's so funny, Mikey, because it's exactly what you mentioned. It's like building a box and then introducing chaos and seeing what emerges out of that, right? Like we've just completely modeled it.
Yeah,
And again, that's the fascinating thing about this stuff.
yeah. And this is the one thing that I've this is the one thing to layer onto too. Like today was phenomenal, but it won't always hit hard, right? It won't always be it'll always be, maybe it'll feel a little flat and it was not as interesting. But I love to continue to try because a majority of the time there's some really interesting things. And then as far as AI in the next month, I'm going very practical here, but I just used, and I used it because of my web browser and the thing that's I was getting access to. I wasn't too concerned about privacy and security, but I downloaded the Claude extension for Chrome because they have the co-work thing that they just released, but it's only for Mac. And I stupidly bought, I was really struggling whether to buy a Mac or a PC, but I think co-work will be out soon enough for PC, hopefully within the next month. And when then I do get that, I will not have to pay a virtual assistant ever again. Like literally yesterday,
It's huge.
in 2 minutes, I had it scrape my analytics on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, said, be my senior strategist, break down everything that you saw, recommend new themes and nuances for the content I want to put out tomorrow. Bam, done. And so when I get co-work, instead of having to go through, and I've started to go down this route of using Cursor or Windsurf or Claude Code native to build my own agentic system to do this. Now it's just built into my computer and I can get to do it. And then it will go to Riverside after we're done. It will download this podcast. It will put it into the folder, perfectly named. It will then upload that to freaking Spotify. It will write all the titles. It'll do all the descriptions, and it'll just send me a notification saying, Mikey, everything's ready for you to review. The ungodly amount of time I spend doing this shit is insane. Within a month, well, it's not even within a month. It exists now. I just don't have access to it because I'm not on the right operating system. So I'm hoping within a month that will all be solved.
Yeah. It'll probably be sooner because it's just, that's just a product development, product releasing thing. So, obviously native to building on the Apple systems, and there's also a supporting thing going on. But it's a little easier just from a development perspective. It's a little easier to build it in some context, to build it on Chrome because it's open sourcing, but you've got Android stuff you're dealing with. Right. Where with Apple, you have to go through the Apple test flight process and stuff, which is really good. Like they're very going back to the guardrails and stuff. So Apple's very particular about what goes out on their systems and what works with the ecosystem, because it's about the brand as well as the product and everything else like that. So hence why, so if you're building within that space, it makes a lot easier. So I think you'll see a release of this solution in the next couple of days to a week.
Yeah.
For Claude Co-work on the Chrome thing. It just makes sense, right? There's so many users already out there that are already using that. So it just so I don't think you need to be waiting a month, but it is beautiful that it's able to do that. And that comes back to it's creating this, helping you accelerate your flow state because you don't have to waste your time. Go and I'm sort of lead on that. It's like, I think that's Elon's whole point, saying like, robots are going to be able to take all the mundane stuff away, which is going to allow us to operate in this higher state of creativity, consciousness. And I'm excited because imagine what we could achieve in that space as humans, as a human civilization, what we can evolve. Like this is exciting, So
the stakes are high, right? Because one of the most recent announcements is the two tech titans that have competed for decades on end, Apple and Google. Apple said, okay, we surrender. We are not doing AI, but we have built, to your point, Adam, a beautiful product infrastructure and an environment to make it easy to code and to make it easy play in an ecosystem. And they're like, yeah, we're going to pick that enemy Google as our AI platform. So the stakes are high, and that like even though it scares me, the big brother wise of it, because it all merging into one big tech titan that controls us all, at the same time, it excites me to know that people are willing to make these sacrifices to like figure out what crazy stuff is possible. So beautiful conversation, gentlemen. I thank you so much. We went for almost 2 hours, and we have multiple people watching us. So I think hopefully somebody learned something from this. We will be doing this every week. Johnny, before you fell off, you are welcome back anytime, my friend.
Would love to come back.
We will continue to talk about AI, the evolution of consciousness, and what Civitas is doing to tackle that. And we love you all. Mikey, Johnny,